Back again with something kind of new today. My name is Josh, thanks for checking out the channel, and today we are going to be doing a ranking video. Today specifically, since it's the beginning of the new year, finishing 2022, we're going to talk about our top 5 movies from 2022. Now I had thought about doing a top 10, as I do see a lot of reviewers do things like that, but honestly for me, as I was reviewing the list of movies that I've seen this year, if I did top 10, that's going to be really hard for me to get to the bottom 5 as well. So we're going to go with top 5, and then we're going to do my bottom 5 of the movies that I've seen. Now keep in mind, this is all subjective. These are movies that I've seen that I really enjoyed, and when we get to my list, there's going to be some specific reasons why I really enjoyed those, and they probably won't be on everybody else's list. Plus, all film is subjective, so this is definitely going to be my list. I have not seen all the movies that have come out. I really have only gone to see the movies that I really wanted to see, and I've watched a lot of them streaming. I used to be a really avid moviegoer, but after COVID and having everything shut down and having a lot of things available in-house, it's been really hard to kind of get back to the theaters. So I have seen a cluster of movies in the theater, but I haven't been able to see as many as I wanted to, and there will be some movies that I haven't seen that are just going to be omitted from the list. So there are ones that I wanted to see that may have been on this list, but I haven't seen it yet. So Bullet Train I haven't seen Silent Night, and I haven't seen Barbarian yet. Those are really some of the top 3 that I haven't seen that I wanted to see that won't be on this list just because I haven't actually watched it yet. Now, truth be told, there's also a couple other movies on here that are pretty big ones that I haven't seen because they really just didn't interest me. So that's Avatar: The Way of Water, the new one of those. I literally did not care at all about that movie. The first one was okay, then 10 plus years of waiting for the next one, and then the trailers did nothing to really get me excited about going back to that world. So I haven't seen that one yet. I might end up watching it at some point, but it won't be on this list either, as well as Top Gun: Maverick. As odd as it may be, because I definitely did grow up during Top Gun era, I was never a huge Top Gun fan. So when the second one came out, I literally had no interest in seeing that. And I did hear multiple times that it's a fantastic movie, and I know how much money it made, so there's a lot of people going to see it and re-see it. And I might check it out eventually, but again, I haven't watched the first Top Gun in, I don't know, decades, so there was nothing really drawing me to watch the new one. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you my top 5, and then we're going to count them down, and I'm going to give you a couple of honorable mentions in there. So let's just go ahead and get started. Number 5 for me was kind of a surprise. This is one I had heard nothing about, and then all of a sudden Netflix had dropped a trailer, and this is a Netflix-specific movie, and that is Trolls. So Trolls is a Norwegian film that hit Netflix in the latter part of 2022. I think it was early December. And I remember watching the trailer and reacting to that one, and I was super jazzed because there was another troll movie from Norway in 2010, somewhere around there. It was called Troll Hunter. That was more of a found footage movie, but it really expanded on the troll lore that I was aware of because we don't have as many stories about trolls in America that they do like in Norway. So it was really interesting to see a different take on like fairy tales and things like that, and maybe where their origins came from. So when the new Troll came out, or when at least the trailer came out, I was super excited. And then when the movie actually happened and I started watching it, I was not let down. I'm also a huge fan of giant kaiju movies and giant monster movies. Godzilla is one of my favorites. So when you get this movie, which is basically kind of, in my opinion, Norway's version of Godzilla, because there's some environmental things that really lend to the troll being there, which again harkens back to the original creation of Godzilla and what that was all about with nuclear weapons and things. So this one, there's a little bit more deep story about a daughter and a father's, kind of falling out and then coming back together for an adventure, which was perfectly fine. Acting was good, but the star of this show was absolutely the troll. The troll, the special effects, the production value of this movie was just through the roof. For me, it looked fantastic. I bought all the story. You had a couple mustache twirling villains in there, but again, that didn't even bother me just because I enjoyed the movie so much. Not to be spoilery or anything like that, but it definitely made you feel for the trolls at the end, much like, honestly, I did with Godzilla. I always associate with Godzilla in the Godzilla movies, not the actual people in them. Troll to me was very similar, but that was the point of it, I believe. And it came out of the gate swinging, and I really, really enjoyed that one. And I will rewatch it many times, which is a very important factor when I'm going through my top movies. Is it a good movie, quality made, everything like that, but am I going to rewatch it again? And Trolls, I'm definitely going to be rewatching you. So that's my number 5. Moving on to number 4. We've got a couple streaming services, specific movies, is one that came out specifically on Shudder. I am a horror movie fan, and a lot of the movies that I've watched, and several of the movies on this list are going to be horror movies. Unfortunately, several of the movies that are going to be in my 5 worst are also horror movies from some rather large franchises that really let me down. But number 4 on my list is actually going to be Deadstream. So Deadstream premiered on Shudder this year, and Not too much fanfare, honestly. Like, I haven't heard a whole bunch of people talking about this movie, which kind of shocked me because the quality of the movie I really enjoyed. The humor of it, the writing and the directing, all of that I thought was top notch. Now, to preface this, I am a bit of a found footage fanboy, more or less. It's probably my favorite subgenre in horror, honestly, and in some action movies too, or anything where they do found footage. I am a big fan of that for some reason, as long as it's done well. I mean, it's a way to make a movie on a very cheap end, but at the same time, it can also be very effective. It really puts you in the story, in my point of view. Again, it can be done really bad. There's a lot of bad found footage movies, but there's also some really good ones, and I also just really enjoy them. Deadstream was written and directed by Joseph and Vanessa Winters. Joseph Winters actually stars in the movie, and then he's got his co-star, which is basically the only other person in the movie, Melanie Stone. These two, ironically, also starred in another movie that will be on my list, not necessarily the good list, but they were the best part of another movie that was also found footage, so maybe a VHS movie that'll be on a different list. They were by far the best part of that one. Deadstream is basically about a disgraced, more or less, YouTuber or content creator that is trying to regain his followers and his clout by going and doing something on the more extreme end. His whole channel and the whole collage at the beginning is just fantastic. And granted, I'm a bit biased as he appears to be, you know, a seemingly middle-aged man working on YouTube trying to make some good content, and well, here I am doing very similar, and I would do similar things to some of what he had on there, like going to a haunted house and trying to live stream that to get over fear of that. I don't know that I'd actually do that. The thought of that would be good, but I also might just watch the movie because it's pretty fantastic. So, you have a disgraced streamer, he's trying to get back. Something had happened where obviously he became disgraced, and you get little hints of what happened in the past, but more or less it is a haunted house story. They're super creative in how they actually set up the found footage format. That's one thing that in all found footage movies, they always have to have some sort of rationale for why the camera's still rolling. This one, again, specifically, he's a streamer. That's what he does. How they do it is also really cool. So it's not just the same shaky cam all over the place. He puts up different security cameras more or less, but mobile cameras all around this house. So you get to flip through different ones and be able to see what's actually happening. And then there's really only one other person in this movie, technically, but it is an awesome combination to me of a really creepy haunted house movie, then you mix some really practical effects and a good bit of gore and grossness. I mean, there's a little bit of Evil Dead mixed in there with like Blair Witch, but it's not really very serious. There's some genuinely creepy parts, some genuinely creepy imagery and things like that, but overall, it's just such a funny movie. The main guy, Joseph Winters, he is hilarious. His pacing, his delivery on things. I mean, he really passes as a scumbag, you know, just like a good YouTube creator that doesn't care about anything else, just getting those views and getting those likes. So there is some commentary about that to reflect on, about, you know, what is the price you pay for YouTube and or fame and stardom, and by what means and what ends do you go to get that. And he's a very prime example of the polar end of do anything for this one, and it's a very hilarious story. How it unfolds, the things he does, he pulls the audience to see what he needs to do next. If you haven't watched that one, I would definitely say check out Shudder, or go get Shudder and then check this one out. There's other good movies on there too, but that's been my favorite of the year, I think, from them. Number 3 on my list is a brand new addition to one of my favorite franchises, and that is Prey. So if you're unfamiliar with Prey, that is the next sequel, although it's a prequel of sorts, to the Predator franchise, in a very different take on that one. This comes from director Dan Trachtenberg, which I'm pretty sure he's most known for 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I thoroughly enjoyed. I liked Cloverfield, the first one. Of course, as we talked about, I am a huge fan of found footage, so large-scale found footage I also really enjoy. But 10 Cloverfield Lane, when that one came out, that one was very different from the first one, but the quality of what happened there, again, if you haven't seen that one, go check it out. John Goodman's fantastic as just maybe psychopath, maybe not, I don't know. Either way, the tension, how that one was shot, the environmental nature of it, that film was really well made, and he brought a lot of that to this movie. If you don't know the story of Prey, basically it's a standard kind of story of the Predators. Predators come here to hunt the deadliest things they can find on the planet, and in this case, it happens to be a time where this specific Predator comes to Earth, and he runs into some Comanche warriors. And let me tell you, it's pretty fantastic. This movie is definitely going back in feel and tone to more like the first movie, where there's not a ton of dialogue. The Predator becomes scary again. I've liked all the Predator movies, just to throw that out there, but I understand why people haven't liked the last couple, just because, especially the last one, it was very jokey and very kind of meta and aware of itself. This one is basically like a straight up horror movie / thriller with some action in there. the Predator is freaking scary. And when you think about the Predator fight, or trying to fight the Predator with primitive weapons, that becomes even more scary to me. The cool thing about this one is the Predator seems to kind of match the level of weaponry that his adversary has in order to make it a good kill, as they are prize hunters, more or less. There's so many cool things about this one. How this movie's shot, it's so dark. It seems like it's natural lighting, even though I know they did some very ingenious ways of getting some extra light on the actors as they're walking through very dark spaces, but it looks really good. The Predator himself looks awesome. He's very imposing. He's much more athletic than some of the previous ones. He's not as big and bulky. He's fast. He uses the trees a lot more. They show you some things that has been assumed in some other Predators, but never really kind of shown. And all the violence. The violence is awesome in this one. It's not super over the top. I mean, it's a Predator movie, so there's going to be a little bit over the top, but it's in line with Predator. It's not a Saw movie where things are just going to be getting ripped to pieces and you're going to see all of it. I say that, and there was a bear that basically got gutted, like, right in front of you, but it was awesome. Speaking of the bear fight. Come on. There are so many positive things about this movie that I just so thoroughly enjoyed and didn't really expect it. I heard what the movie was going to be about and that it was going to be released on Hulu and it wasn't going to be a theater release, and my expectations just kind of kept going down based off of that, and I was very, very wrong. Movie came out, I absolutely loved it. The acting was great. You had a lot of indigenous people that were actually in the roles. Then you had some French fur traders that were there as well. There's a lot of story that goes with that is really good. It wasn't one where I felt beat over the head with any specific social commentary or issues. It was just, let's get this good movie done. You put strong people in good roles and you let it go. And it worked really well for me. The only downfall I had on this one, to me, was the CGI a bit on some of the animals seemed a bit wonky. So if it is the bear or even like the coyote, I don't know if it's coyote or wolf in there. A couple things like that every now and then. The CGI was a little wonky, but honestly, doesn't bother me now. Doesn't bother me now. I go back and I'll rewatch that movie again and again, which again, that's a high marker for me on my ranking list because I really enjoy watching movies. So if there's a movie that I'm going to rewatch, that's going to move it up that list a good bit more. Prey, return to form for Predator, and I just absolutely loved it. Can't wait to see what they do. Hopefully this opens the window to go explore Predator throughout different timelines, and this one was awesome. As we get to my top two, this one did take a good bit of thinking. Prey was also really close to the top, but when I get to these last two, I like them both almost equally, but for vastly different reasons. And then one of the deciding factors, again, came back to rewatchability for me. So for number two, this is actually The Batman. So if you are unaware, I am a huge Batman fan. Of all superheroes, Batman has been my favorite growing up, and I will defend that to the bitter end, even though there have been some very hit-or-miss movies. But I've enjoyed basically all the Batman movies. Even a lot of the bad ones, Batman and Robin and things like that. I was at the right age where those came out that I loved Arnold as Mr. Freeze, the one-liners and cheesy stuff like that. But then as you grow and you watch them again, you're like, ooh, maybe not the best. But then you've also had the Nolan trilogy. You've had all of the Zack Snyder films with Ben Affleck that have come out. Then we have this whole thing going on, and all of a sudden, blammo, we get Robert Pattinson as the Batman. And this is a movie that takes place out of the old DCEU, or whatever you want to call it, the DC universe. It's kind of its own standalone thing. I remember hearing about the Robert Pattinson casting, and I had a lot of my friends that were just waiting for me to kind of freak out and panic. I had to take a second when I first heard it, and I was like, what? But after we've had so many different castings of different actors in roles that you would never see them as, of course, it starts back with like Heath Ledger. I mean, if you go back further, Michael Keaton being cast as Batman originally was something that I don't think a lot of people really saw working, and that was my first Batman. So, well, that and Kevin Conroy on Batman Animated Series. Rest in peace, Kevin Conroy. You the man. So I've really learned to try and give the benefit of the doubt, and specifically with Robert Pattinson, yes, I know he came from Twilight. I've also seen the Twilight movies, and yes, they're not good. They're kind of some guilty pleasure movie to watch every once in a while. But I didn't think it was bad because of him. And then since then, he's been in a lot of different movies that are vastly different than Twilight. I mean, he's been in some very small, gritty, independent movies. Then he came back and most recently he was in Tenet, Christopher Nolan movie. He had a pretty big role in that one, and at that point, that was the role I realized. I was like, firstly, he's kind of a big dude. I mean, maybe not be super large big, but you can add some size on when you want to. But also he's tall and he's kind of imposing. So I was like, okay, maybe he can do this. Then when you start to get the first trailers, he was intimidating. And I was like, okay, I think this might be good. Went to the theater, saw that movie. It was a longer movie, but honestly, didn't feel long to me in the movie. It was fantastic. Robert Pattinson nailed it as Batman. It was a very interesting story and take on Batman. There were so many elements of this movie, though, that were really good. The villains in this one were fantastic. The Riddler. What I got out of this one was the first 20 minutes, I thought it was a horror movie. Literally. I was in the theater with my girlfriend, and I was like, are we watching like Seven or something like that? There were some legitimately creepy scenes of, Riddler and people being in the background, coming into frame, and then doing some pretty brutal murders in that movie. This seemed like the most, and I've said this since I've watched it and people have asked me, like, how did you think this compares to the other Batman movies? I said, I think this is the closest Batman to the Batman from the comic books. And it's from a very specific time. This is an early Batman. He's not the seasoned Batman that we normally see, and it's not year one necessarily Batman. This is a couple years into it, so people know of him, but he's also kind of still a little bit of a legend, but he's really trying to impose that fear into the crime element of Gotham, and it's working. Some of these scenes in this one are so cool because they do almost make Batman scary. He's meant to be intimidating. Christopher Nolan, again, people, they were afraid of Batman, but that message didn't come across like this one. This one, it's like when bad guys are starting to do something, they look over to a shadowed area and they're just expecting Batman to be there, and they actually stop what they're doing and stop crime and go away. This is also the movie that I think the Batman himself as a character has the biggest arc. I mean, he's learning, he's doing things, he's not the best at everything yet. It's a very cool thing. Like, even as he tries to get access to, one of the gangsters' clubs multiple times, he takes different paths to get there. One, knocking on the door to get in, then sneaking in, and then there's just so many cool things about that. And it's a cool detective story. It's a mystery trying to figure things out, which I really thought was very cool, because that's a lot of Batman. Again, you grew up with the Batman animated series, those were all mysteries. You're trying to figure out what's happening, and you have the world's greatest detective doing that. And then working with the police, mostly working with Gordon, who was awesome in this movie as well. I just really, really dug this movie. The only reason for me that it's not necessarily number one is A, because I really enjoy number one, but also because it's a heavy movie. Like I say, it's not one that I'm just going to throw on in the background and have just going. Like, if I'm going to watch that one, I'm going to sit down and watch it and focus. Not quite as heavy as like Seven, but very similar element. Fantastic movie. Before we get to my top pick of 2022, I do have a couple of honorable mentions that were on my list, and they almost broke into the top 5, and those are Hocus Pocus 2. This is one that really surprised me. I'm a huge Hocus Pocus fan. The original one, grew up watching that movie. I've seen it so many times. I live fairly close to Salem. I've gone to visit Salem for Halloween the last couple of years, so I'm definitely a big fan of all of that stuff. And I was concerned when Hocus Pocus 2 was announced because it's been so long. I think 26, 27 years, something like that. First trailer came out and I was like, okay, that looked pretty good. You have a whole new cast of young kids that are in it. They're going to be the center of this, and then you'll have the sisters, and we'll see what kind of story they tell. Then I watched the movie, and this movie's about the sisters. This is the Sanderson sisters movie. You have the new cast that's there, and I actually really enjoyed them. It was a diverse, eclectic cast of people, but they weren't annoying to me. I really enjoyed the movie. The storytelling, they actually kind of made the witches scarier than I thought they were in the first one, but I enjoyed so much about that movie. And it's definitely getting added to the rotation of watch that one every Halloween. So that one was really close. And the other one that was really close for me was Glass Onion. This is one that just came out on Netflix from Rian Johnson, and it is the sequel to Knives Out, which they're both really good mystery movies. I literally just watched Glass Onion, so I'm still letting that one process a bit. I don't think I like it as much as I did Knives Out. Knives Out to me was such a pleasant surprise because I did grow up playing and watching Clue. It was one of my favorite movies. Being around my family, we always watched different Hercule Poirot or Agatha Christie, all solving mysteries, murder mysteries, all that kind of stuff. So Knives Out was right up my alley. You had this great cast, and then you had a very interesting way of telling the story of, laying out what happened and then going back and taking different perspectives on what happened. I just thought that came together really well. Glass Onion, the cast is also really fantastic. There were some good standouts. Batista's one of my favorites. I'm a little biased though because I'm a huge Guardians fan, also a wrestling fan, and just generally speaking, I'm a Dave Batista fan. So I thought he did well. Edward Norton was a great eccentric billionaire, and I'm just a gigantic Daniel Craig fan. And him in this role specifically, honestly, as I'm thinking about it, I enjoy him as James Bond, but that may be my least favorite role of his because I don't really watch those much, and that's not saying those are bad. It's just I enjoy him in these kooky kind of roles. This one, there was Logan Lucky. Several movies where he's played some very non-traditional, non-tough guy characters, and he just nails it. With Glass Onion, I thought it was definitely very creative, It's a very good mystery. The story was a bit bigger, felt a little more clumsy. I didn't really like all of the characters as much. I mean, you're not necessarily supposed to like them, but there were some really funny scenes with different ones. It was a very solid movie, but it was also pretty long. I think that was like 2.5 hours long, and I felt the time on that one a little more than I have in some other movies, so that's what took it down a couple pegs. But I'm sure I'm going to rewatch that movie, and it might raise up on my ranking over time, but for now, it's going to be coming in outside the top 5, but pretty close. Now, my number 1 movie, kind of surprise for me, but also kind of not, it is Nope. So this is Nope from Jordan Peele. This movie shocked and surprised me. I've been a fan of Jordan Peele's movies. They're very creepy, very environmental. They tell some like very kind of scary, different, twisted stories with his first couple movies. But there's a lot of, social commentary in those, which isn't bad, but it's not necessarily something I'm always looking for in my horror movies specifically, or just movies in general. Nope, to my surprise, wasn't super heavy in that. The themes that are hit in this one are important. I don't feel like you get hit over the head with anything specific. You kind of learn some lessons, you try and figure out as the characters are figuring out what's going on, and kind of go from there. The setting for this one is really what gets me. I mean, obviously Jordan Peele is really good at setting a creepy environment. He uses sound design really well, picks his frames and his shots really well to be nice and creepy. But in this one, it was far funnier than I thought it was going to be, which I appreciated. When you infuse some humor into some movies, it makes it, a lot more rewatchable, but also, to me, more realistic. Because if I'm put in a weird-ass situation like this one was, I'm going to be making jokes pretty consistently all the way through, because that's going to be my way of coping with it. This is more or less the story of the remaining family of these horse trainers in Lonely Gulch Ranch, California, as they're trying to survive and keep their father's dream alive of, having horses that work in TV and film in Hollywood. You have Danielle Coulier, Keke Palmer, and Steven Yeun from Walking Dead fame that are kind of your main people in this movie, and wow. The marketing for this one was fantastic because the trailers were so creepy, and I, at least, really had no idea what to expect coming out of this one. And they kept subverting expectations as they would give you little hints as you walked into it, and you're like, okay, well, clearly there's going to be something in the sky. They show different things that trying to lead you to some of the traditional things that we think of from Aliens, and then they completely subvert expectations with that. The thing I really enjoyed about this movie as well are some of my favorite movies are ones that take place in a confined space or like one location. In this case, pretty much most things happen at their ranch, and you get very familiar with that, so you're able to be a little more invested, or I feel you are. I'm a fan of monster movies and creature features, and this is a very interesting take on that. So I don't want to ruin too much if you haven't seen it, but basically how this one operates is fantastic. It's some things that I have never seen before. It takes a very traditional kind of thing. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that there's, aliens of some sort in this, or some sort of UFO. Put a more modern twist on it. So it's like taking all the things that we grew up with about our conceptions of aliens and UFOs, putting those in a big budget movie, doing it really well, making it look very real, but putting some twist on it, and some horrifying twist. This was a legitimately scary movie to me in several scenes. There's so much tension. There's a side story going on that's, again, kind of mimicking the overarching story about domesticating animals, and it has to do with a chimpanzee, and chimpanzees just scare the crap out of me in general. They're really cool, but at the same time, they are so strong and always go for the soft things. So the tension used in this one's fantastic, but the humor just makes it so much more manageable, and I will rewatch this one. I've purchased it, and it's going to be rewatched multiple times. So I was a huge fan of Nope. I came out of that one just smiling ear to ear. Not what I expected. I had to go tell everybody about it. And I'm just going to be rewatching that one and enjoying it as we go. I know for a lot of people that was their least favorite of all the Jordan Peele movies. For me, it was the exact opposite. That's the one I enjoyed the most. But again, like I said, this is my list and it's definitely subjective. Let me know what you guys think. What are your top 5? Do you agree with mine? Have you seen these? And which ones did I miss? There's definitely probably some movies that I missed on there that are probably pretty good. So let me know in the comments section. Don't forget, like, share, subscribe. Go to hit that subscribe button if you would. That'd be fantastic. And as always, you're awesome. Peace out.